All right, now that we've gotten the new stuff out of the way, or maybe old stuff, I don't know, let's talk about intercepts. So intercepts are something that people have dealt with before, and we're just going to do a quick recollection here. Recall that the x-intercept, that's where it crosses the x-axis, and that just means that y equals 0, right? So x-intercept are the points where y equals 0. Y-intercept, there's always only ever one of them, and that is the single point where x equals 0. There's only one y-intercept because if there were multiple y-intercepts, well, then it'd fail the vertical line test and it wouldn't be a function anymore. All right, so can be multiple x-intercepts. This is how you find it. Will always only ever be one y-intercept, and that's how you find it. So let's do some problems. Example 2. Find the intercepts. All right, so a little bit of factoring review and a little bit of definitions. Part A is going to be f of x equals x minus 2 times x plus 1 times x minus 4. So to find these intercepts, we just plug in the things. Let's start with the x-intercept. X-intercept is when y equals 0. It is a good idea to write this down every time you're solving it. 2 reasons why. 1, helps you remember, and 2, is useful for partial credit if you mess up. All right, so remember y is the dependent variable. It is the function output. So when y equals 0, that's what this means. We have to solve this equation. And here, this equation's not too bad. It's already factored. If a bunch of things multiplied by each other equals 0, that can only happen when this, or this is equal to 0. So that means x minus 2 equals 0, or x plus 1 equals 0, or x minus 4 equals 0. And you can solve each one of these equations pretty straightforwardly. You get that x is equal to positive 2, negative 1, and positive 4. My 4 really looked like a y there, and it made me pause. I was like, x minus y equals 0. Jason, what are you doing? All right, so these are the points, the intercepts. They're the points where y equals 0, 2 comma 0, negative 1 comma 0, and 4 comma 0. These are our x-intercepts. As a side note, I will take this as an answer. Not all math professors will. But this thing on the bottom is the best. You want a little happy face? Write them as points. All right, so the x-intercept is when y equals 0, and the y-intercept, likewise, is when x equals 0. This one is usually a little easier. So that's going to be when y is equal to plug in 0. 0 minus 2, 0 plus 1, 0 minus 4. Simplify and type with a calculator. Negative 2 times positive 1 times negative 4. Oh, you don't really need a calculator for this one. Negative times a negative is a positive. 8. The y-intercept is when x is equal to 0 and y is equal to 8. These are our intercepts. Ta-da! Let's do some more practice. Because sometimes you're going to have to factor. So this will serve as a factoring review as well. So if you're good with factoring, then there's nothing new in parts B and C. But if you're not good at factoring, this is going to be a good review. As always, it is a good idea to pause the video and try to work through these on your own and see if we get the same answer. F of x equals x to the 4th minus 4x squared minus 45. Well, let's start with the x-intercepts. Those are when y equals 0. These are all the solutions to this equation. Well, if this were a quadratic, we could use a quadratic formula, but it's not a quadratic function, right? There's an x to the 4th. This is a quartic function, a 4th degree polynomial. The highest exponent of f is 4, and it's just a bunch of power functions added together, which is why it's called a polynomial function. But we can still factor it, okay? Because notice this is x to the 4th. That's x squared times x squared. Then this is our x squared term. And this is 45. So we actually factor this like we factor a lot of trinomials. The difference is, when we factor it like this, how do we get x to the 4th? X squared times another x squared. And then we need two numbers that multiply to negative 45 that add to negative 4. Multiply to the last number, add to the middle coefficient. So let's see, we're gonna have to go through some pairs. Well, they have to add a negative 4, so like this doesn't work at all. 5 times negative 9. I was actually planning on listing a bunch until I got to the right answer. It just so happens that I started by listing the right one. These two numbers multiply to negative 45 and they add to negative 4. So that means there's a plus 5 and a minus 9. Every time you factor, you should check to see that you're doing it right. So whether that's in your head or whether that's off to the side, x squared times x squared is x to the 4th. Minus 9x squared plus 5x squared is minus 4x squared minus 45. Okay, so this is indeed the correct factorization. So we need to figure out when this is equal to 0. And you could split this up now if you wanted, or you could keep factoring it. This first term doesn't factor. This is x squared plus something else that will never factor. And the second term is what's known as the difference of squares. It's something squared minus something else squared. 9 is 3 squared. And the difference of squares always factors, like so. X squared minus 9 is going to be x minus 3, x plus 3. And again, you can check your answer by foiling. Check your answer and make sure that we factored correctly. So now this is going to be true in each individual piece is equal to 0. And we'll solve each individual piece. X squared equals negative 5. This is going to be a complex solution. All right, that's going to be x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 5 times I. I is the square root of negative 1. So our x-intercepts, these need to be real. So yes, there is a complex solution to this equation, but no, it is not an x-intercept. Okay. The second one is when x is equal to 3 and when x is equal to negative 3. We get our x-intercepts to be 3, 0 and negative 3, 0. And the y-intercept is going to be really quick. First we found the x-intercept, which was when y equals 0. And now we can find the y-intercept, which is when x is equal to 0. And you just plug in 0 into the equation. 0 to the 4th power is 0. Minus 4 times 0 squared. Oh, this is quick. The y-intercept is just negative 45. X is 0, y is negative 45. And it can be a good idea to check these answers. We didn't do it for the last one, but let's check our answer for this one. We can check our answer pretty straightforwardly. I don't know if that's a word. We get x to the 4th minus 4x squared minus 45. What are our intercepts? The y-intercept is negative 45. X-intercepts, positive and negative 3. There we go. You can see visually what's happening. Good way to check your answers. Make sure that you're always right. Part C. F of x equals 2x cubed minus 6x squared minus 20x. This one is going to factor a little differently. You're always going to try, and I should have commented in the last one, whenever possible, you want to pull out the greatest common factor. Whenever possible, you want to take out the biggest thing that they have in common. In the last one, there was nothing in common, but in this one, they do have things in common, right? All of these numbers have a 2 in them, so take that out. All of these numbers have an x in them, so take that out. And then what's left over is going to make things easier. Well, what's left over from the first term, if we took out a 2 and an x, well, now there's an x squared that's left. There's a 3x left over here, or negative 3x left over here, and a negative 10 left in the last one. And now we factor this trinomial, and the 2x stays at the front. 2x is getting multiplied by that trinomial, so 2x will get multiplied by what that trinomial factors into. It's a trinomial with leading coefficient of 1. That means it's going to have this form. The only way for us to get that x squared is an x times an x. Now we need two numbers that multiply to negative 10, that add to negative 3. Well, let's list some. 1 and negative 10 multiply. That's not it. 2 and negative 5. There it is. We always know the negative is the bigger one because it has to add up to a negative number. All right, so this just becomes x plus 2 and x minus 5. And every time we factor, we do a little check. X squared minus 5x plus 2x is minus 3x minus 10. We're good to go. We did it right. This is fully factored. So the x-intercept, I didn't write this down earlier, but the x-intercept is when y equals 0. That's when 0 equals 2x times x plus 2 times x minus 5. That's true. Principle of zero products is what it's called. It's true when each individual piece equals 0. When the first piece equals 0, when the second piece equals 0, or when the third piece equals 0. This first one usually trips people up. We divide both sides by 2. That gets us x is equal to 0 divided by 2. That's still 0. Second one will be negative 2. And then positive 5. We get our answers of 0, 0, negative 2, 0, and 5, 0. And I claim that we've actually finished the entire problem. But you might say, Jason, no, we haven't. We still need the y-intercept. The y-intercept is when x is equal to 0. We already found it. Accidentally. In this case, one of our x-intercepts is also a y-intercept. Okay. So you could plug this in. Or you could say, all of our intercepts are just down there. Right, the y-intercept is also 0, 0. You can box that again. You don't need to. Just an FYI. All right. Let me know if you have any questions. And that's this video. Good luck.